What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in this video I'm going to be going through my way too early top 10 wide receivers for the 2024 fantasy football season. So last week I talked about the running backs. For those of you who are fantasy football psychos, already looking forward to the 2024 season, this video is going to be for you guys. Like I said, very early on in the process. Obviously, we're not even done with the playoffs here in 2023 or for the 2023 season. So I want to hear your guys' opinions. Which players do you think are too high? Which players do you think are too low? Going to be splitting these wideouts up into different tiers also. But let's just dive right into it. And I'm going to start off with my tier 1 wide receivers. And my wide receiver 1 heading into 2024 at this point is going to be CeeDee Lamb. And to be totally honest, I didn't really see this 2023 season coming for Lamb here. I did like him heading into the season, but I really didn't think he had this crazy high-end wide receiver 1 finish. The dude averaged 23.7 PPR points per game. He led all wide receivers in targets, red zone targets, receptions, yards after the catch, and total touchdowns. And coming off the big season and the fact that he has the quarterback security with Dak Prescott, I do think he's very deserving of being the wide receiver 1 here. He flashed that ceiling. Some of the guys I'm going to get to, they have some other minor concerns. CeeDee Lamb just seems like a very well-rounded dude heading into 2024. Now, the next wide receiver, also in Tier 1, is going to be Justin Jefferson. And if we knew that Kirk Cousins was going to be 100% healthy and back with the Vikings, I'd probably have Justin Jefferson as my wide receiver 1. But those are definitely not guarantees at this point. Who knows if Kirk is back to 100%? Who knows if he's even back with the Vikings? They may be rolling with a different veteran, or they could be rolling with one of these younger quarterbacks, a rookie dude. We just don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be at this point. But if we remove the one game where Justin Jefferson was bounced out early, played less than 20% of the snaps, he averaged 21.9 PPR points per game. So another very impressive season out of Justin Jefferson. Obviously, he dealt with some injuries, but when he was on the field, he was very, very productive and playing at a very high level. And that includes also playing with backup quarterbacks in his last 4 games. Even with a new quarterback, I still think he could be a high-end wide receiver 1, but I just don't know if he'd be given that, number 1 overall wide receiver slot in my rankings. Sticking around in Tier 1, going to go with Tyreek Hill as my wide receiver 3. He just barely finished behind CeeDee Lamb in points per game, averaged 23.5 PPR points per game. He was number 1 at the wide receiver position in target share, target rate, receiving yards, and yards per route run. I think really the only concern here for Tyreek Hill is that he'll be 30 heading into the 2024 season, so maybe he starts to slip just a little bit, but he was wildly impressive this season. I think he's going to be a top fantasy pick heading into 2024. And then my final Tier 1 wide receiver is going to be Ja'Marr Chase. Kind of a tough season overall for Chase, and I really just don't think it was his fault. We had Joe Burrow struggling early on in the season when he was dealing with his calf injury. Then he ends up being out for the season during Week 11. Chase ended up being the wide receiver 12 at 16.4 PPR points per game. So his season definitely didn't compare to the guys ranked ahead of him, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, but we've seen Ja'Marr Chase average 20-plus points per game in a season. With a healthy Joe Burrow heading into 2024, I think Chase is going to bounce right back up to that high-end wide receiver 1 production. And also, who knows what's happening with T. Higgins here? We could see Ja'Marr Chase unlock some new volume if T. Higgins is no longer on this roster. So I do like Ja'Marr Chase in Tier 1, even though he's coming off a not-so-great fantasy season. Now, pivoting into Tier 2, and this is actually going to be my only Tier 2 wide receiver. I feel like this dude is kind of sandwiched between Tier 1 and Tier 3. It's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. He has taken significant leaps from Year 1 to Year 2, and then now from Year 2 to Year 3. He finished the season as the wide receiver 4 at 20.7 PPR points per game. He was 5th in targets, target share, target rate. He's commanding targets. He's producing. He was 2nd in receptions and yards after the catch, 3rd in receiving yards. Just a very strong overall season out of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He hit that 20-point-per-game threshold. It's possible the Lions bring in, some competition at the wide receiver position, but Amon-Ra is a stud. He's going to be a mid to high-end wide receiver 1, I think, for a very long time. So really like Amon-Ra here in a tier by himself. And then pivoting into Tier 3, I'm actually going to start off this tier with Garrett Wilson, and it might seem crazy to have Garrett Wilson this high considering he finished as the wide receiver 33 in points per game, but when we look at the Jets quarterback play, it's really hard to imagine many other wide receivers performing better than what we saw out of Garrett Wilson. The Jets had the third fewest passing yards and the fewest passing touchdowns with just 11 passing touchdowns. 17 games, this team threw for only 11 touchdowns. The difference between Aaron Rodgers compared to Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, and Trevor Siemian is just absolutely massive. I don't even think we can even fathom the difference in the quarterback play we're going to have here. So I think Garrett Wilson is a strong wide receiver one heading into next year. If you want to put some of the more established, proven guys ahead of him, I totally get it, but I think Garrett Wilson proved he is plenty talented. He's going to command a lot of volume. Now you give him the quarterback play with Aaron Rodgers in 2024. I think Garrett Wilson is going to be a very strong option. Also in tier 3, going to have A.J. Brown. It was a solid fantasy season out of him. He finished as the wide receiver 8 at 17 points per game. Started to slip a little bit later on in the season, but still a solid finish. Pretty much closed out where you drafted him as like the wide receiver 8, somewhere in that range. Similar finish actually to last season, but he did it a little bit differently. In 2022, A.J. Brown was supported by his efficiency and his touchdowns. In 2023, didn't have the same efficiency or touchdown production, but he relied much more on volume. I think he's a solid mid-tier wide receiver one heading into 2024. Probably going to be pretty consensus here with A.J. Brown. And then my final tier 3 wide receiver, it's going to be Puka Nacua, and it's really shocking to see a rookie season like we saw out of Puka. And it's even crazier when we factor in that this dude was a 5th-round pick and didn't really do anything crazy in college. This is by far his best season, and it's with, the most competition he's had at the NFL level. He was the wide receiver 6 in points per game. Stafford had some question marks heading into the season. He looked super impressive in the 2023 season. I still think Cooper Kupp is definitely going to be a factor, but Puka looked to be the wide receiver 1 even when those dudes were playing together. I think he's going to continue giving you that wide receiver 1 production. Just seems like a perfect marriage here with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford there at the quarterback spot. And then pivoting into my final tier for this video, tier 4, going to start it off with DJ Moore. And this was by far DJ Moore's best fantasy season. There was a lot of talk heading into the season about whether this Fields-Moore duo would kind of work out. There were some examples of guys like, Stephon Diggs taking that jump. A.J. Brown took a jump when he went to the Eagles, pairing these young quarterbacks with a stud wide receiver. We had that situation here, but it definitely wasn't a guarantee that it would work out. It definitely worked out for DJ Moore here in 2023. He saw career highs in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. He was the wide receiver 9 in points per game. And when we look at just the games with Justin Fields, remember he missed some time where Tyson Bagent played quarterback. With Fields at quarterback, DJ Moore actually averaged 19 PPR points per game, which would have been the wide receiver 6. There's definitely going to be some uncertainty here heading into 2024. Is Fields going to be the quarterback? Is it going to be Caleb Williams, Drake May? Will he have a top wide receiver prospect joining the team, a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, right? If they keep Justin Fields, you could definitely see them getting a guy like Marvin Harrison if they trade back. Even if they don't keep Fields and they draft a top quarterback, they also have another top 10 pick, which could turn into a guy like Rome Odunze. So this situation is definitely up in the air, but I think this was a fair spot to rank DJ Moore. And then my final wide receiver in this tier is going to be Keenan Allen, and he's coming off a season where he finished as the wide receiver 3 in points per game. There are definitely some question marks heading into 2024. I don't even think there's a guarantee that Keenan Allen is going to be with the Chargers heading into next season. It's certainly possible that he's back, but he also could be a cap casualty for them, especially bringing in a new coaching staff. Who knows what direction they're going in. And then they also could draft a top wide receiver. They're in the range where they could get a guy like Malik Neighbors, trade back Rome Odunze, someone like that. And I also just have to point out that Keenan Allen is heading into his age 32 season. He dealt with some injuries later on. Who knows if he could have played, right? Maybe if Herbert's healthy, they're trying to make a playoff push. Maybe he plays, but that's back-to-back seasons where he's missed some time. So definitely some things up in the air, but it's tough to leave someone who finishes the wide receiver 3 in points per game out of the top 10. So he will wrap up the top 10. Now with the running back position, I felt like the running backs kind of fell off after the top 10. The wide receiver position, there are a lot of guys who I could see an argument, for making it in here. So I just wanted to, go through my honorable mentions, players that I considered. got to talk about the Texans wide receivers. I think a lot of people are going to point to Nico Collins, but I think Nico Collins and Tank Dell are going to be pretty similar heading into next year. Nico Collins obviously balled out with Stroud back and Tank Dell injured, but remember, Tank Dell was putting up fantastic numbers as a rookie, and that was with Nico Collins in the lineup for a lot of that. So I think both those guys are very relevant, with the quarterback play of CJ Stroud. I think Michael Pittman's also interesting. I believe he's a free agent heading into this offseason. Another free agent, Mike Evans, putting up great numbers. What's his landing spot going to look like? Is he going to stick around with the Bucs? Is he moving to a different team? We will wait and see. Got to mention the 49ers wide receivers, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. If both those guys are both playing, it's kind of tough to see one of them putting together like a crazy high ceiling when they're on the field together, but I think they could definitely be fringe, wide receiver ones in terms of their ADP. Stephon Diggs, an interesting player, right? Had a really strong start to the season, was viewed as like a mid to high end wide receiver one heading into 2023. Really had a fall off, I think it was like since week 10, the production had not been great. How are we going to be feeling about him heading into next year when he's a year older? And I think Devontae Adams is also interesting. Not a great fantasy season, but the quarterback play was just not there. What do the Raiders do at the quarterback spot? A lot of questions with the wide receivers, a lot of depth at this position. So if you had some other guys, toward the bottom, I completely get it. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to continue posting throughout the offseason, whether it's, looking ahead to next year, talking about this rookie class, all of that stuff. So thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.